Grace and peace. I'm Brian Moss of the Baptist Campus Minister at Drexel University, and I am going to be practicing a seminar that I have for the Student Organization Resource Center Student Life Leadership Curriculum that is entitled Leading the Whole Person, a spiritual look at leading ourselves, leading others, and leading organizations. This is based on an idea that Jesus said, and a lot of Christians are familiar with this. This is also kind of embedded within Judaism. Jesus is referring to a central passage within Judaism as well, and it has been kind of a popular thing in culture as we unpack it. And one thing I want to highlight is that on some levels, ancient wisdom from 2,000 years ago from the mouth of Jesus, or it could actually be considered 3,500 years ago from the mouth of Moses, actually has implications for what we do today and how we lead and engage our seminars at this point. Now, we use this passage a lot in discipleship within Christianity, and it has a lot of spiritual implications with how we worship, how we live our lives, how we do everything that revolves around the Christian faith. But that is not the context in which I'm going to be using it today. There's going to be a lot that a Christian could take from this, but there will also be it will be available to anybody who is. In this idea, Jesus is talking about what it means to love God. And in doing so, Jesus divides the person into 5 categories, more or less. And these 5 categories are a good way to organize how we think about human beings, how we think about the different parts of human beings. And as we're trying to lead organizations, knowing a little bit about humans and having some handles to engage thought around human beings might be a good idea. So let's just look at this quote. The most important is, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength." The second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. Looking at this passage, Jesus divides the human being into heart, soul, mind, strength, and also to love our neighbors. And that is kind of the summation of what Jesus thought life on this earth should kind of revolve around, and how a human being could actually engage God is in these 5 areas: with our hearts, with our soul, with our mind, with our strength, and in our neighborly sort of way we do things. So I want to kind of look at those 5 categories, not really unpack it so much as what worship of God is or what discipleship looks like. I do that within my Christian organizations as I'm teaching and leading folks. We use this as kind of the handles about how we do the Christian life. But I want to look at it and unpack how Jesus saw a human being, and does that give us handles in which to engage and lead human beings in this way. So Jesus broke the human being down into 5 categories: heart, soul, mind, strength, and neighbor. And if we take these 5 categories, we can unpack the words a little bit. I spend a lot of time studying these things and just looking at what these words mean. Now, the heart is one of those words in the Bible that could mean a variety of different things. In fact, it sometimes doesn't even mean heart, but means kidneys. Only a couple times does it seem to mean the actual physical organ of the heart. Quite often, what it can mean is the entirety of the insides of a human being. Everything that's going on in what we would call the mind, the soul, all these things can be called heart. But when heart is used in context with soul, mind, strength, when the heart is used in context with other of these big words, it seems to be pointing to this idea of the will. The heart is the place in Scripture where somebody decides, someone chooses, someone makes decisions, makes commitments. So we're going to say, love the Lord your God with all your heart would be love God with your will, and that's going to be the area of your choices. So from here on out, we'll probably be referring to this idea, this heart, as choices. Then the second thing he says is soul. And that is also another one of those words that can mean a lot of different things in Scripture, especially in context. And it can mean, again, kind of like heart. It can mean the entirety of everything that is going on inside of a human being. But in context with heart, mind, strength, it means the emotive pieces, the feelings. Love the Lord your God with your feelings. Love the Lord your God with your choices. Love the Lord your God with your feelings would be a modern way to describe these. Third one, mind, that is the mental aspect, that's the thoughts. That is the one that is the most transferable to today. The thoughts are pretty much the same today as they were back then, and we'll unpack that a little bit more. And then love the Lord your God with all your strength. That is your physical being, that is your actions, that is how you take what's going on inside of you through your choices, feelings, and thoughts and put them into action. We are, as human beings, we are able to eat food and burn calories so that we can make changes in the world around us. That is our strength. Sometimes this is translated might. This is not only just our actions, but sometimes our physical presence in the world. It's our embodied soul. The Bible treats the human being as an embodied soul, and how that embodiment interfaces with the world around us. How we take what's going on the inside in our mind and our feelings and make it outside in our actions. Actions is a good word here. And then love your neighbor as yourself. This is the relational and relationships. Love God and how you deal with other people, not just your neighbor, and this word is unpacked so much, but just the people around you, your family, your friends, your enemies, everybody. So these 5 categories are a pretty decent way to split up the human being: the choices, the feelings, the thoughts, the actions, the relationships. If we can do something that engages all 5 of those things, when I talk about discipleship, I talk about discipleship in the area of how you choose, in the area about how you feel, in the area about your thought life, in your actions, and in your relationships. If we could get those 5 pieces together and those 5 pieces engage, then we could easily be saying we're engaging the entirety of the human being. And that's what we're looking at. And that's how Jesus unpacks who a human being is. Choices, feelings, thoughts, actions, relationships. This is kind of like the idea of who we are as people. And Jesus said, love God with all of you are, and these are the parts of it. But we're going to look at this as a good definition of how we should engage a human being, either in leading ourselves, how we lead ourselves through these things, how we can lead others through these things, and how our student organizations can engage other human beings in these areas in a way to do those things. So, the process. We start with choices. The choices are our heart, our will, our decisions, our commitments, our choices. So I really think I kind of am of the opinion that human choice is kind of one of the most important things that make us human, our ability to decide. Stephen Covey would call it our ability to be proactive, or our ability to not just be reactive, but we can take stimulus from the outside and choose to react to it in a choice way. That is what we're going on. And looking at that, the second one is thoughts, our mind. And this is our intellect, and how our intellect engages information, ideas, and images. This is our thought life. And interestingly enough, and I want to unpack this a little bit, information is probably the most ubiquitous piece of this, but is the least important. But what we know, what information we have, ideas are so much more important than information. That's how we think about the information. That's how we process the information. That's how we use the information. And then the images are the most important ones, the most not important, but motivating, moving, the most significant ones of everything out there, and those are the images. And just to kind of put you through this, like information would be kind of stuff we know. Ideas are what we think about the stuff we know. And then the images are almost even how we take the stuff we know and what we think about the stuff we know, and we kind of file it into meaning and those sorts of things. So the cross, just two lines formed in a letter T within Christianity. The cross might be one of the most powerful, meaningful, important, significant, ubiquitous images throughout human history. Like, just two lines in a kind of a lowercase t sort of position for people can mean so many different things, and that is just an image that quite often we'll get a reaction all the time. And this image looks at these things. Now, the idea is knowing that, what the cross was about, knowing about those things, those are the ideas behind it. Sacrifice, death, resurrection, Jesus. These are ideas. Information would be, stuff the story sort of stuff, the information revolving around it. But the information's important, but the ideas behind it are much more significant. And then the images that those ideas kind of coalesce into are just the most significant ones there. So, and then this is the deal, is the place where we have the greatest amount of freedom of choice, the place where our choices matter the most, is in our thoughts, in our mind. We can choose what we think about more than any other place in the world. We can't always choose how we feel. We can't, and I'm getting older, I'll be 50 this year. I can't choose how I act as well as I used to. My body, and I can choose to think about flying, but I could never act on flying. So there are these things where our choices about how we think is much more important. Our choices about what information we go and find, our choices about what ideas we concentrate on, and our choices about what images we kind of put in there. And we have more choice in the information than we do in the ideas, and the images are the most ingrained of them all, but each one of these are important. And if, as human beings, what we have the most choice on is our thoughts, we can choose maybe not what fleeting thoughts come into our head, but what thoughts we concentrate on, what thoughts we dwell on, what thoughts we just kind of inhabit and allow to just overtake our mental process. So those are the first two, and then we have feelings as the third one. And the feelings are soul, our motive center, our emotions, our feelings, how we feel about stuff. And not just, kind of like grumpy, but, like hope, joy, peace, big words, anger, wrath. These sorts of things, these deep and meaningful and significant feelings. Now, this is where this sort of thing gets interesting. We can't choose our feelings. That's really hard for us to do that. We just can't do that. We really have very limited control over how we feel about certain things. However, we can choose how we think, and quite often our thoughts influence our feelings. So this idea of, I'm going to think about how that person cut me off in traffic. If I choose to think about that consistently and meditate on the action of this person cutting me off in traffic, and I kind of create the idea that he did on purpose, and the image of an angry guy shaking his fist at me or giving me the middle finger as he's doing it, I create that image in my head. That's going to significantly affect my feelings. And my feelings will change based on my thoughts. I might not be able to control my feelings, but I can quite often choose how I think, and quite often choosing how I think and what I think will affect my feelings. Now, this is not a one-to-one thing. This is not a guarantee. This is not a definite, but this is kind of just the way things typically work in a stereotypical form. I can choose to think about good things, which like puppies and rainbows and clouds and flowers and things like that, and it will significantly change my feelings. I can choose to concentrate on terrible things like, New England Patriots or, New York Yankees or those sorts of things. And that will, make my feelings even go downhill from there. And this is where it kind of comes full circle, or full triangle. We never make a choice that we don't feel one way or the other about. We always choose what we feel should be the right thing to choose. Our feelings might not be accurate. We might not even admit to our feelings. And quite often we choose the thing that is the lesser of two evils. We choose the thing that is the easiest. We don't always choose the best thing, or we don't always choose what we feel is the best thing, but we do make our choices on our feelings. We imagine two future possible worlds out there, and we make the choice of which one it is. Quite often we choose a possible future where we made a decision, or where we put off making a decision, and if we procrastinate, it's the put off making the decision that we choose, and things like that. And this can create a kind of a virtuous cycle in our internal life, or a vicious cycle in our internal life. We make good choices to think about good things, which gives us good feelings, and good feelings make it so much easier for us to make good choices, and we keep going around. Or we make terrible choices to think about terrible things, which then creates a sense of terrible feelings within us, and that leads to even more terrible choices. So this is kind of what's going on inside of us, and how we can either spin this wheel one way or the other. Like, I want to lose weight, so I think about how I will eat, but then I drive by Taco Bell, and I have images of burritos come into my mind, and the joy that the burritos give me, so I choose to go to Taco Bell, and it kind of counteracts my choice to think about losing weight there. And quite often human beings are not in kind of a completely virtuous cycle or a completely vicious cycle. We're in kind of just bouncing back and forth between two, where our choices are never kind of unidirectional. We choose good things sometimes, we choose bad things sometimes, and we choose good thoughts and have good feelings, but then we choose bad thoughts and have bad feelings, and we could just kind of are kind of just in a state of limbo quite often. If you ever want to just, like, if we could ever move this thing where we make good choices more often than not, which lead to better thoughts more often than not, and have greater feelings more often than not, that leads into good choices. And if we could keep that going just for a little bit, that is one of those places where life just starts to feel easier and easier. We think about studying, we train ourselves in the habits of studying, which gives us feelings of confidence and making choices go that way, and we just choose our way into a little bit better of a life where this cycle is kind of like almost a self-fulfilling virtuous cycle that keeps happening and moving forward in those ways. So that is the internal cycle, internal process, and we're going to kind of reset this and start looking at how this engages the external area through our actions, our strength. It's our physical bodies, it's our presence, is how we take the internal world of our choices, thoughts, and feelings and turn it into the external world through action. It's how we get stuff done. And quite often our actions are the way we get stuff done, and engages our relationships, our neighbors, our social context, others, family, friends, acquaintances, enemies. And these are our relationships. And this is kind of the external area of this as well. We got the internal, our choices, thoughts, feelings, and then the other place we can choose is to act. And as we act, we engage others in our relationships quite often. Sometimes our actions are not an action that would engage anybody else, but if we're ever going to engage somebody else, it's through our actions, whether that's through our voice or through our just physical movement or our presence. There is no way we engage people that doesn't involve our physical bodies doing something in the real world. That is, even if we had telepathy, that would be still our minds pushing thoughts out to somebody else in the real world. So I would still consider that an action. So, and as we look at this, just kind of bringing it in, our relationships, people engage us where we are physically present. We have to hear them say something. We have to see them do something. We have to read their written words on a paper. They engage us physically through our physical senses, and through that they can influence our thoughts and our feelings. I don't think people can directly influence our choices outside of like major like torture, waterboarding, psychological harm. I don't think they have direct access to our choices, but they have access to how we think and how we feel, and that can greatly influence our choices. So this was just that. I don't think people can access our choices. That makes sense. Like, two people can be from the same environment and have two different responses to that. So as we're looking at this is a great way to figure out how to lead folks, and lead ourselves. If we could choose how we think and how we act, then that would greatly increase better ways about our feelings and our relationships. And then as we're doing that, we also have to, if we engage in good relationships, they can also be kind of a feedback loop that helps us think well, gives us good information, good ideas, good images, and then they can also engage us through our feelings, making us feel joy, peace, hope, these great things, which will lead to better choices in our thoughts and in our actions. Just kind of giving us sort of a handle about how to engage the world ourselves. If we could just be more determinative, be more diligent, be more just decisive in what we choose to think about and how we choose to act, we could have power over ourselves in a way that would just be life-changing and probably world-changing. And this is kind of, and just to be a little bit of a side, this is kind of the model we use for discipleship within our Christian groups, this idea of, and we got a little bit of a spiritual aspect to it, and just how we think about things, dwelling on good and godly things, feeling godly ways about things, making good and godly choices, acting in good and godly ways, having good and godly relationships. That's kind of like our template for how we go about discipling and how we lead ourselves in this Christian relationship. And there's a lot of value to that. But I do think this idea actually is valuable to those who are of a different faith or no faith at all. I think this choices, thoughts, feelings, actions, relationships, and how they interact with each other is a valuable and easy way to implement things in your life and look forward to it. A lot of this could be seen as a little bit like I believe it's cognitive behavioral therapy. This idea of just thinking and controlling our choices and our thoughts and our actions this way. But let's actually take a moment and start looking at this in light of groups. Okay, and we can't control how people choose. We can't make decisions for them, but we can influence their choices through their thoughts, their feelings, their relationships, and their actions. So, information. Do they know what they need to know about this group? Have you given them the information they need, or this event? How do we influence the way people think about our group and our events? Ideas. Do they know the purpose, mission, vision, values of the group? Do they have a reasonable expectation of what this event would be like? Do they know the purpose and ideas of the event? Images. Is your group or event logo, initials, name, immediate recognizable on campus, and is that recognition positive? What image do people get when they think of your group? So thinking through your group, thinking through the information people need to engage your group in a significant way is an important thing. Thinking of the ideas of your group, the purpose, mission, vision, helps people to have the correct ideas about who you are as a group. And then these images, just pictures, ideas, feel. The images will be more about how they feel about your group. If you want to kind of control how people feel about your group in any way, is start getting a good image out there about your group. And then feelings. How do we influence the way people feel about our group? Kind of in the information. Was it easier to find and understand the desired information about your group? How we think about something controls how we feel. If they have to figure out, if they have doubt about your group informationally, they'll have negative feelings about your group. Their ideas. Do they feel like the purpose, mission, vision, values of the group positively connects to their lives? Did the event meet or exceed their expectations? Not was it a good or bad event. Did what you communicate about the event, the purpose of the event, the reason for the event to be, and what the event would be like, did that match what they expected the event to be like? And that's a kind of a community where you communicating an expectation of the event that was actually met. Images. What will they remember about the experience at your event or with your group? How will that memory make them feel? So those are some kind of ways to actually use these 5 things, or the feelings part of these 5 things, in how you engage your group. Now, actions. Do you have a pathway that moves someone from not being involved to leading involvement? Participation. In what ways are people new to your group invited to participate in your group? The 2 ways people engage a group are relationships and responsibilities. So these actions, responsibilities. Do you have limited tasks that you can give to new and developing members that invite them to grow in their participation? Actions, leadership. Are leaders encouraged to see tasks as ways to develop group participation and member commitment? Is delegation seen as a key leadership development strategy? So how do we use people's need to be responsible, people's need to act, people's choices to act? How do we use those to engage group participation, to give group members increasing levels of responsibility, to encourage leadership not to do the work, but to delegate the work so that it starts engaging and grabbing people in through their actions? And the other way people relate to a group and belong to a group is through relationships. Do you have a plan to help others relate across the different types of connections with the group, the leaders? How do we encourage leaders to relate well to each other, to members, to contacts, members? How do we facilitate relationships between members and leaders, among the members and between members, and contacts? How do we surface contacts? How do we initially connect to contacts? How do we transition contacts into members? These relationships, the 2 reasons people stick with a group are relationships and responsibilities, and some of those ways and how they choose and engage groups. Thoughts, feelings, actions, relationships all kind of lead into choices. Choosing your group. How do we positively influence others' thoughts and feelings, give appropriate levels of participation, and foster meaningful relationships so that they choose to move from a contact to a member and from a member to a leader? This is looking at who we are as human beings, how we are choices, thoughts, feelings, actions, and relationships, and putting in the context of group dynamics so that as we're engaging and trying to lead people through our groups, trying to connect to people in our groups, trying to engage our groups as human beings, we're engaging them through these 5 areas, through their heart, mind, soul, strength, and neighbors, or in their choices, in their thoughts, in their feelings, in their actions and relationships. Using these 5 categories could easily give you kind of handles on how to better lead yourself, lead others, and engage folks through your student organizations. Thank you.